This is gonna sound bizarre and made up, but I swear on my left nipple that this happened, and there are several witnesses. Even if I can't explain why someone would do this, I am fairly positive this isn't anything paranormal. I live quite a distance off the road, in an unremarkable house on private property. My neighbors are all older family members who go to bed extremely early and whose children are already grown and out of the house. In summary, there are no mischief makers to play pranks on us here. A few months ago, my mother and I stayed up late one evening watching television together. Around 3 a.m., I turned the television off and decided to go to bed. As I was leaving the room, I began to hear what sounded like carnival music playing outside of my house in the front yard. It was loud and close. My mother heard it too, and immediately went to the window to investigate. She couldn't see anything but darkness. Everyone else was either asleep for the night or away on vacation. The lights were off in all their houses, and none of them would be caught dead listening to anything but country music anyway. We were miles from the nearest city, so it wasn't the product of noise pollution. The silence where we live is usually deafening. All you can hear is the ringing in your ears. Where did this song come from? Who was playing it? And why? I was very unsettled by the idea of a stranger in our yard playing carnival music. As such, suggests malicious intent. My father and uncle later mentioned that 20 years ago, when my parents first moved in, the electrician had come to install a ceiling light and stopped in the middle of his work, saying he could hear Pink Floyd playing in the front yard. Neither my father nor uncle could hear it. My father is a bit hard of hearing and my uncle is much older, so they laughed it off and thought the man was insane. But the electrician was freaked out. He kept opening the door and trying to find the source of the noise to no avail. Then it hit me. The song I heard that night was Pink Floyd's Cirrus Minor, the part that sounds like carnival music. I played the song for my mother, and she began freaking out, saying, Yes, that's what I heard." Who the hell sits in my yard at night at 3 a.m. in the middle of nowhere playing the same song? Which isn't even a popular song, 20 years later with no car. Where did they come from? They would have had to have walked several miles to get here. Aside from this, the only other strange thing we experienced that would suggest an intruder? We feel and hear knocking on the living room window late at night around the same hour. Sometimes so intense that the entire wall of the house is rattled and it sends the couch against it into a reclining position. There are no nearby trees to tap the glass, and no animals except a human could possibly reach it. Fortunately, this has stopped over the last few weeks. Over the last week, someone has sabotaged our air conditioner by removing the fan and destroying it. They did not steal the copper parts, only destroyed it and left. In the days following, we found the electrical box left ajar where someone had been tampering with it to try and cut the lights or disable the security system. I thought it was a prank at first, just a belated April Fool's joke from one of my buddies. I never thought for a second that it could have spiraled into the horrifying mess I found myself in. The thick stone ceiling above me has made calling the cops impossible, but I think I have just enough signal to get this out to the internet. My note in a bottle, if you will. There are no clocks here, but as far as I can tell, this all started a few hours ago. I sat, hunched over my computer desk, squinting at the harsh blue light of my monitor. I was going through my nightly ritual of scanning through Craigslist for any good deals. I was moments away from powering the computer down and giving my tired brain a break when I saw it. The image was so surreal. It took me a moment to figure out what I was looking at. There, nestled between a vintage typewriter and a dusty old sofa, was a picture of me. The title was my full name and the price was listed at $1,500. I mentally went through all of my friends and family, trying to figure out who would do something like this, but came up empty-handed. I saw there were more pictures and went to scroll through them but hesitated. I was afraid that I'd be met with fuzzy Polaroids taken of me from behind bushes and through windows. However, as I scrolled through the images, I realized I recognized each one. I'd taken them. They were all from my Facebook feed. A selfie I'd taken with some friends at a bar. A picture of me at the beach with my girlfriend. I felt my heart rate begin to quicken. My Facebook was set to private and I never friended anyone I didn't know. How had these pictures gotten onto the internet? I clicked the listing and began anxiously reading the description. Product is a 26-year-old Caucasian male. It is 237 pounds and 5'8". It consumes approximately 2,200 calories per day. I raised an eyebrow at that last line. What would anyone want with that information? It went on to describe everything I'd eaten for the past 2 weeks in meticulous detail. Everything from the McGriddle I had on my way to work to the Snickers I'd munched on today after dinner. They even knew about my ADD medication. I nervously glanced around my house, suddenly feeling naked and vulnerable. Where were they getting this information? How long had they been keeping tabs on me? Just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, I saw a short message at the end of the post that made my skin crawl. Product is unathletic and should be easily collected by 2 to 3 people. Bringing weapons are suggested but not needed. Collected? Any hope of this being a joke was beginning to evaporate. How many people had seen this listing by now? What kinds of people go searching for a listing like this at all? Then I had a thought that made me bring a hand to my mouth. Did this page have my address listed? It seemed terrifyingly possible. The listing had seemingly every other detail about me. Why not that? My eyes scanned the webpage until I found a message that explained everything. Address for $1,500. Email me if interested. It made a sick sort of sense. They'd found a way to monetize their stalking. Why let such a great talent go to waste, right? I wondered how many other people he'd done this to. How many home invasions and robberies and abductions he'd helped facilitate just for a few $1,000. I immediately flagged the post, hoping to have it taken down. However, I quickly realized it would take hours, maybe even days for the moderators at Craigslist to get to it. I didn't have that time to spare. My fingers flew across the keyboard, searching Google for some way to get a hold of the people at Craigslist. But in the end, all I could find was a generic contact form. Getting desperate, I opened my email to try one last gambit. I plugged in the seller's address, a random string of numbers and letters, and typed out a desperate plea to take down the listing, offering 5 times the original price. Waiting for a response was torture. I passed the time by running around my house, locking all the doors and windows. I also turned out all the lights to make it look like no one was home. I knew realistically, the odds of some psycho seeing the post was slim. But the internet was a big place, and I didn't want to take any chances. I was so on edge that, by the time I heard the ding of the email notification, my heart practically jumped out of my chest. I regret to inform you that the information has already been purchased. I buried my head in my hands. I had been too late. How long ago had it been bought? 10 minutes ago? An hour? A day? My line of thought was broken when the crackle of wheels on gravel brought my attention to the window. I pulled the curtain aside and peered out into the night, careful to reveal as little of myself as possible. A black SUV was pulling into my driveway. Its occupants had hidden behind a dark window. I told myself everything was fine, that they were just doing a 3-point turn and would be gone any minute. However, instead of driving away, the doors popped open in unison. 2 figures emerged from the car, dressed head to toe in black. I wanted to turn and run, but fear had paralyzed me. I watched helplessly as the men marched up to my front door and knocked loudly. I realized then that their plan must have been to wait for me to answer the door and drag me into their car. But I knew better. I began calling 911, cursing myself for not doing it sooner. The door was heavy oak and would take them at least a minute or 2 to kick it down. That's when I heard it. There was a strange beeping sound coming from the other side of the door. After racking my brain for a few moments, I figured out what it was. It was the beeping of my door's keypad. They couldn't possibly know the code, could they? Then it dawned on me. The creep who'd posted the listing knew everything about me. Of course, they knew the passcode. My blood ran cold, and I dashed away from the door, looking for a place to hide. Click. The door unlocked. I ducked behind a corner into the kitchen just as it began to slowly creak open. The back door was right at the other side of the kitchen, and I began creeping toward it, grateful I'd turned the lights out earlier. The 2 men cautiously stepped into the living room, talking in hushed voices about where I might be. I had almost made it to the back door when I bumped into the kitchen table. I cursed myself for not seeing it. Their whispers immediately stopped, and they began marching toward me, forcing me to improvise a hiding place. I slipped into my kitchen's pantry and shut the door just as the lights clicked on. The men, apparently no longer concerned with stealth, began stomping around the kitchen, looking for me. I squeezed my eyes shut and prayed they didn't look inside, knowing I'd be completely helpless if they did. I bit down on my knuckles and time seemed to stretch out forever. But they eventually left, going deeper into the house to search for me. I let out a sigh of relief. Buzz. My phone was ringing in my pocket. I took it out and it was my girlfriend, Lexi. My eyes widened. Lexi, she'd be home any minute. What if the men decided to take her instead? I answered the call. Hey you, she said. Lexi, don't come to the house. It's not safe. Oh my God, where are you? She asked, fear creeping into her voice. I'm hiding in the pantry. I think I'm safe, for now, but... The line went dead. I felt my heart sink. Had they gotten to her already? Had I not warned her in time? Then I heard some strange vibrating noise in the room over. One of the men's phones was ringing. He answered it and listened a moment. His voice was raspy and muffled. He's where? Another pause, then footsteps, thundering, straight toward me. My mind raced momentarily, and then it hit me. The one who had posted the listing hadn't been stalking me. They had been living with me. Lexi was the one who'd posted it, and she'd just told them exactly where I was. I burst out of the pantry and made a break for the door, just as the 2 men rounded the corner behind me. I wanted to look back, but fought the urge. If I looked back, I'd get nervous, and if I'd get nervous, I'd stumble, and if I stumbled, they'd drag me into the car and do God knows what. I flung open the back door and ran into the cool, damp air. However, before I could make a break for it, one of them caught me by the hood, snapping my neck back. The fabric tightened around my throat like a snake, making it hard to breathe. I blindly threw an elbow behind me, and it connected with his ribs. The man cried out in pain, and I felt his grip loosen by just a fraction. A fraction was all I needed. I tucked in my chin, drew in my arms, and wriggled out of the hoodie, falling to the wet earth on hands and knees. I made a mad dash for the tree line. As I ran, I heard angry shouts from behind me. "Just shoot! The damn thing is jammed! Oh, give me that!" A loud pop rang out in the night, and something whizzed past my ear. I wondered what they shot at me. The sound was too quiet to be a gun. A quick glance behind me revealed one of the men was holding what looked like a small, lightweight sniper rifle. It was green with a strange white chamber at the bottom. What the hell is that thing? The man shoved something inside, clicked it back, and took aim. Pop. Fear shot through me like a bolt of electricity. I jerked my body out of the way just in time for something to fly past me and bury itself in a nearby tree. It was a dart. They were shooting at me with a tranquilizer gun, like I was a wild animal. And the tree line was about 40 feet away now. My lungs felt like they were full of bees, but I kept running anyway, knowing if I slowed even a fraction, they'd catch me. I did my best to avoid the darts, diving out of the way whenever I heard one of those sickening pops. But eventually, my luck ran out. Just as I reached the tree line, ready to disappear behind the dense foliage, I felt a red-hot sting in my back. Exhaustion began flooding my body, making my movements slow and sluggish. The world spun around me, and soon, I found myself on the forest floor. My memories of what happened next are jagged and frayed. The click of a trunk, and the dangle of chains. When I finally came to my senses, I found myself on damp concrete floor, bathed in darkness, shivering from the biting cold. The only noise breaking the eerie silence were the heavy thuds of footsteps over my head. They left me my phone, maybe to keep me from going crazy, maybe to taunt me. To ensure I can't ask for any help, they somehow blocked all posting or messaging features. At least, almost all of them. No Sleep is the only place that I can post. At first, I thought they'd made a mistake. I thought maybe this subreddit had just slipped past them. But now, I'm starting to realize it's because they think no one will believe me. But that can't be true. At least one of you has to believe me, right? So, for clarification, this was back in 2014, during the summer after The Purge came out, which will be relevant information later. My dad, little brother, neighbor, and I were staying in a cabin for a week during our summer break to go fishing, etc. On our third night staying there, around 11 p.m., some guy comes up and knocks on our door, asking if we could jump his car, because apparently the battery had died while he was driving by. So my dad agreed to help him, but told us to call the cops if he wasn't back in 20 minutes, because our cabin was in the middle of the woods, and he would have had no reason to even be that far down the road, unless he was intentionally on his way to our cabin. 30 minutes pass, and my dad gets back. Says the guy was asking a bunch of weird questions about how many of us was staying and such. but that he just jump-started his car and the guy left. 2 nights later, my brother, neighbor, and I are up late watching TV in the living room. At some point, around 1 a.m., a different guy shows at our cabin, wearing the resort's logo and the uniform with the resort official car, and just stares into our cabin from the porch. He didn't knock or anything, so we have no idea how long he was standing there. But at some point, my neighbor had noticed him staring in at us and jumped up and ran over to the bedroom to wake up my dad. So my dad, annoyed at this point, walks up to the door while not opening it and asks the guy what he's doing here. And he says he got a call from the reception desk that our TV wasn't working and he was here to fix it. Meanwhile, our TV was obviously working since he saw us watching stuff on it for who knows how long. Anyways, my dad tells him we don't need anything and he should leave. The guy then proceeds to say we're out of toilet paper and he needs to refill it for us. Again, my dad says we don't need any and that the guy should leave. He continues to get ruder and ruder, asking about towels, our phones, and other stuff he could possibly refill or fix, but eventually leaves. The next morning, we call the reception desk to report this, because this guy was obviously out of line. They tell us that they don't send out anyone that late anymore for services for the cabins, and that must have been a mistake. So they ask us to describe the guy, about 55 years old, tall, light blonde grayish hair, blue eyes. And when we do, they tell us that nobody with that description works there. So at this point, we're all extremely freaked out and trying to figure out who the hell he was and why he was there. Turns out, that same weekend, there had been hundreds of people across the country attempting to recreate a real-life purge. We don't know for sure if that's what his intentions were, but I'm assuming the first guy, the one with the car problems asking weird questions, was there to scope out our situation possibly. And when he saw it was just one adult with 3 kids, he relayed it to his partner, the second guy, that we'd be a good cabin to rob, hurt, etc. I'm just happy my dad never unlocked our door for the fake resort guy, 'cause who knows why he went through all that effort to pretend to work there. The title might make this encounter seem moderately cool, thanks to Jim Carrey. But to this day, I look back on it and feel a little sick. This was probably 2001, or 2. Sheesh. Almost 20 years ago now. I was very young and dumb. I thought I was invincible, so I just wasn't a very careful person. I had moved into this awesome but isolated apartment. It was located upstairs in a historic downtown building. There were no other apartments in the building or even on the entire street. So when the businesses were closed on the weekends, it was a ghost town. I had arranged to have cable installed. Back then, it was really dumb. They gave you a 4 to 8 hour window of when they might arrive, and you were just a prisoner all day, waiting. I worked nights. I came home that morning and didn't go to sleep because I was afraid of not hearing the cable guy knock. Naturally, it took until mid-afternoon for him to arrive, robbing me of basically my whole night's sleep. Needless to say, I was quite grumpy. He struck me as skeevy on sight, but like I said, I was in a foul mood by then. So I let him in, just wanting to get this over with. He didn't have a uniform, long greasy hair, overzealous smile, and bad teeth. Also one of those people that keeps wanting to inch closer to you, even though you keep stepping away. Back then, I was even more no-nonsense than I am right now, and I was just not having it. I wasn't even moderately polite. Probably the only time I've ever been rude to any sort of person who comes to my house for a service. But I told him to cut the chit-chat. I've been waiting all day. I plopped onto my couch to angrily watch him fiddling with the wires. Problem was, I fell asleep. You know that disorienting feeling when you go to sleep in the afternoon and you wake up knowing you slept much longer than you meant to? Daylight had faded away, and the twinkling streetlights outside were dancing in. And that man was sitting across the room in my armchair, staring at me. I gasped violently and scrambled to my feet, demanding to know what he was doing. He stood up, also, and began to step forward. With his utterly stupid grin and this eerie choked-up voice, he said, "You were just so beautiful sleeping there. I couldn't help but watch you." Maybe he saw something in my eyes, but I stepped toward him and snarled at him to get him out. And amazingly, he did. I can still remember that ugly smile dying on his lips, and he turned and bolted. Thinking back, I always remember how alone I was up there. I was tougher back then, so I apparently came across as not one to be crossed when it counted. But it turned out that man had sat and watched me sleep for 3 hours while darkness fell. Boy, did I get lucky. I posted here a few days ago, and you guys seem to really enjoy my creepy encounter. So here's another. So, like I had said in my last post, I had moved here a couple of years ago on my own. About 9 months after I had moved in, someone started pounding at my door a little past 11:30 p.m. I was already in bed at this point, and was awfully concerned about the person at my door. My upstairs neighbor's aquarium had broken the night before, and it was flooding into my living room. Since I just had a fiasco with my neighbor late at night, I figured it was probably just her again, and almost just opened the door without hesitation. Right before I opened it, I had this horrid feeling wash over me. So instead, I meekly said, "Hello?" through the door. I heard a man reply saying, "Hi, I'm a friend of David Jones." The second I heard him speak, my blood went cold. I had a terrible feeling about this. David Jones, not his real name, was the name of the previous tenant. He was very elderly and disabled. He was in a wheelchair and lived with a helper. He passed away before I moved in. I looked out the peephole, and he was wearing sunglasses. Again, it was almost midnight. A black face mask and black hoodie with the hood up. I said, "David doesn't live here anymore. I'm sorry." He pounds his fist on my door again and laughs, saying, "Oh yeah? Open the door and prove it." Like I said, David was in a wheelchair and needed a ramp for the door, which was removed before I ever even moved in. I also drive a motorcycle, and my immediate neighbors don't drive any particular wheelchair-accessible vehicles. With all this in mind, you would think someone who feels comfortable enough with David to be knocking down his door in the middle of the night after at least almost a year of no communication would be able to evaluate the situation and see that there was no wheelchair modifications, apologize for the mix-up, and be on their merry way. Well, this wasn't the case. He was still pounding at the door and telling me to open up. I told him David is not here. I am not opening the door and he needs to leave. He was standing outside my place for a few more minutes. I was scared and standing frozen by my door. I saw him walk away, I was still by my door when I heard someone rustling around my back door, over by where my bedroom is. I was still frozen. I didn't want to believe that someone could actually be by my bedroom window. For clarification, the area by my window is attached to a common area yard for all of the residents. It is directly off the sidewalk of a relatively busy area. So it isn't uncommon to have someone in the yard, but it is certainly uncommon to have someone directly up against your porch and windows. I heard something loud happen in my bedroom. I grabbed my pepper spray and cautiously approached the room. No one broke in, but something still seemed really off. After a while, I hadn't seen or heard this person anywhere, and I went back to bed. In the morning, I came out for a smoke and saw that my bedroom window screen had been ripped off. It's all bent out of shape. Definitely didn't look like it just randomly fell off. I knew exactly what happened. That guy ripped off the screen and tried to get through my bedroom window. Thankfully it was locked, and I have window jammers. This obviously frightened me, but not much I can do at this point. A few weeks later, someone tried to open my front door in the middle of the day. No knocks, no nothing. I just heard my door clearly try to be opened. I shot up and ran to the peephole to see a man all dressed in black, hood up, with black sunglasses on. He tried the door a couple more times and pushed against it really hard. I was trying to think of something intimidating to say, or something to get him to stop. My brain decided it was a great idea to just hit my door. It worked though, so hey. I slapped the back of my door really hard, and the guy jumped up 3 feet and ran away. Now, here's where I think it gets really bizarre. So, I googled my address. Everything online for my current residence still lists David Jones as the active resident. I 100% think that guy saw me, a young female all alone, and googled my address and was trying to get my trust into opening the door. I think after that didn't work, he was still trying to get in, hence the bedroom window. Him coming back a few weeks later is very weird in my opinion. You would think he would have either moved on to another target, or would have been much more interested in getting in sooner. I definitely don't think that he knew David. I don't think he owed him money, or was family, or any of that. So the timeline is bizarre, but maybe he already had other victims and just decided to try my place again. At any rate, his plan didn't work, and he was gone. Literally months upon months go by. Someone knocks gently at my door around 9 p.m. I got up to look, and what do you know? An individual covered in black head to toe with sunglasses on. I didn't answer, or make any noise. He slowly turns the door handle and pushes on the door. Then takes a few steps back and walks to my neighbor's door. And I heard him try theirs. My neighbor is a middle-aged man living alone. The door didn't open, and I see him walk up the stairs and can hear him trying yet another neighbor's door. This apartment has 5 people living in it, including a child. That door didn't open, and he tried the remaining door. That didn't currently have anyone living in it. Failed again. Creepy, all right. So that makes me think maybe he didn't single me out as a vulnerable female, because he just seems to be trying to get into anywhere he can. I do think it's rather strange that my cats hate him. I have never seen either of them hiss, except for when this guy is at my door. They always are clearly very frightened and are ready to fight, which is majorly unlike either of them. You honestly wouldn't even know they have teeth or claws unless you are a cardboard box or a laser pointer. Back in early January, our clad in black lad is back. My brother, who looks quite intimidating, was over for a visit. He got up and opened the door to see this guy actively trying to open my middle-aged neighbor's door. The guy ran for his life away. My brother wasn't aware that this was an ongoing issue, and where he thought it was weird, he wasn't trying to run after this guy either. Today, I was taking a nap. Around 2 p.m., I hear an aggressive knock on my door. It pauses for a few moments and then picks back up. While this is happening, I heard my upstairs neighbors quickly close their windows. I was tired and figured it was the same creep, so I didn't even bother looking. After a few minutes, I heard him knocking on my neighbor's door. After that failed, he went upstairs and knocked on the 2 doors up there for a bit. After a while, the knocking stopped, and I heard my upstairs neighbors open their windows back up. I couldn't sleep anymore, so I grabbed my smokes and headed outside. I could hear my neighbors through their open window. The little girl was asking her mom who that guy is and why he keeps doing this. I know of him bothering them at least twice, but it could definitely be more. I have reported this to my landlord. She is absolutely no help, and basically just tells me not to answer the door if I feel unsafe, and to call the police if it escalates. The police don't have a quick enough response time to come out here when it's happening. I did call them before, and I don't have much of a description for them to go off of. Basically told me not to open the door if I feel unsafe, and to call them if it escalates. You would think someone ripping my bedroom screen off would count as escalating, but I guess not. This guy has been bothering me for a little over a year now, and apparently my neighbors as well. It seems really weird for a criminal to do. Just keeps trying to break in the same group of apartments over and over again. At all hours of the day and night? I guess I just have no idea what he's after. For anyone who saw my last post, that might be wondering if this is the same neighbor that tried to drug me. I suppose it is possible, but he doesn't look like the same build. The peephole does give some type of distortion, so I guess it could just be that. It really could be. I'm not sure. I think it's unlikely, especially with trying everyone's door and not just mine, but it certainly could be. This stranger is harassing my neighbors and I consistently, and none of us even know what he looks like. Don't open your doors to strangers, folks, no matter what time of day it is. This is my first ever post on Reddit, but I thought this would be a perfect place to share. This happened over 10 years ago, but still creeps me out to this day. Quick backstory. My parents are divorced, and at this time, I lived full-time with my dad. I had just left my mom's house because I was saying goodbye to my dog that we were putting down that day. I was a mess, and so sad. My dad is in a bowling league, and has been forever, so I was returning home to an empty house. As I pulled into my driveway, I saw the landscapers were there. However, there were way more than usual, just standing around. They were somewhat standing in the driveway, and did not fully move as I was pulling in. They proceeded to try and get my attention while I was just trying to pull into my garage. I ignored them, and almost backed out of the driveway and went somewhere else, because I just immediately got a bad and uncomfortable feeling about this entire situation. I got inside my house, and immediately started crying. I was a teenager and felt uncomfortable, and my dog was being put down. I could hear the men talking outside, and I went upstairs when I heard the doorbell ring over and over, and then knocking at the door. I locked myself in my bathroom as the knocking and ringing of the doorbell continued. They kept yelling, "We know you're home." It went on for what felt like forever, but probably lasted about 20 to 25 minutes. And I remember trying to call my dad, but he didn't answer since he was busy. I convinced myself they had a concern or question somewhere, but if that was the case, then they could easily reach out to my dad when he got home. leave him a note or give him a call later. Instead, they harassed me, a teenage girl, when they knew I was home alone. I also wonder if they are actually real landscapers. There were so many of them just standing around in the driveway, not doing anything. We have a small yard, and I've only seen one, maybe two guys doing our landscaping before. It was so creepy. It was a bad day that turned worse.